lot of people have been asking me about it, so I'm just going to do it. It's about a deaf dog. We're getting a lot of response on that poem a day again. It's pretty successful.
It's fun, and you also have the tweet poems going on where people can, in 140 characters or less, write a poem for us, go on Twitter, use the hashtag, which is the £, and do LONPOEM, and it'll automatically appear on our homepage as a Twitter feed, which is kind of cool. It's nice. One of those nice little geeky additions that we can do every once in a while.
It's also, I've found, hard to write a poem in 140 words.
It is.
Characters.
And you have to take out the letters for the hashtag.
Very difficult.
Yeah.
You can't put a title in, for example.
You did have a good one, though. Who was the birthday that was shared?
It was the birthday of the Internet and Buddha.
Buddha, they were both born on the same day. I think a few years apart, however, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Either that or Buddha had sort of a prolonged gestation.
It was before the facts.
Yeah. One of the other things that we've been able to put up recently that I was kind of fond of was that you and I went down to Everybody Reads bookstore recently, and we were able to listen to Bonnie Jo Campbell, the 2009 finalist for the National Book Award, author of American Salvage, which is a really brilliant book. She came down and was interviewed by Randall Glum, and I thought really gave a thoughtful hour of commentary on what's happening in the book business, what young authors ought to be thinking about. What were some of the highlights from that session?
Well, one of the highlights for me, and Bonnie mentioned this early on, is that she speaks candidly about everything, which is one of her kind of her things she's worried about. But she did mention that when asked about what's sort of the online version of the author today, and she mentioned that it's very important to an author. She specifically talked about an online literary magazine that has a print version. You get 3,000 copies of the print, you probably get 30,000 people read it online.
Right.
She says it's an important part of being an author now is online publishing.
That's controversial in publishing circles.
Extremely controversial, but she obviously recognizes it. She talked very candidly about how difficult it is for her to write and how many different careers she went through before she decided she wanted to be a writer, including a bike tour operator.
Getting her PhD in math?
Math.
Wow.
Unusual, but the next day or the next week she won a Guggenheim Award.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Which means she probably doesn't have to work very hard for a year.
Ah, well, that'll be nice.
Except that writing, you're supposed to do it in the field.
Well, she does a lot of distance learning with classes. It's called what, part-time residence, where she comes.
Low impact residence
is that
programs,
what it is?
Right? You get a master's degree in writing that way. You do most of it online.
Okay.
You have a mentor, and then you meet a couple weeks every about 3 months with your professor.
Well, I had to give some guest lectures in some of the journalism classes today, and also teach in my class, and I was very struck by what she had to say in terms of advice for young authors, young writers, young journalists, which is that it used to be maybe 30, 40 years ago that writing was a rare commodity, that to find somebody who was a talented writer was, boy, you wanted to nurture them and hire them quickly because there wasn't that much talent in the field. The reality nowadays is everybody can write. And everybody can shoot a video, and everybody can take an image, whether it's on their cell phone or not. And on the internet, there is a phrase that's called good enough. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. You're doing things in such a high-speed environment that if you can go out and grab some video and get it right up there, you may not have to polish it like you would have the Apple before. And so she's saying you have to really be able to say to people, what makes me different? Why would I get that job and somebody else wouldn't?
And she works hard at that. She is very good at, I don't like to call it self-promotion, but promotion, I guess. I mean, she's really good at networking, getting back with people. She does, I think she sets aside some time every day to do that in addition to her writing. A lot of the older writers don't like to do that.
Yeah, it's not in their nature to do that
No.
kind of interaction. One of the things we're going to be talking tonight is looking at one of the challenges that young writers face trying to get into the business with all the new media and online media opportunities. How are they going to support themselves? One of the articles that we just did, however, on Lansing Online News, by the way, you can catch our live webcast of our radio show on our website, www.lansingonlinenews.com. We're busy waving into the camera. Yeah, we have a live feed embedded there. I did a piece on the accident fund. I gave a little bit of I acknowledge certain things that are positives about the new accident fund building downtown, which is that, yes, it is a pretty building. I know because I took a picture of it and it was pretty. And it's green, and that's good, and it's historic, and that's good, and it took an old power station and turned it into something else. But it's really hard nowadays, and I don't think anybody has the capacity anymore at any of the local news organizations to really dig down deep and find out how many tax dollars is that really costing us. They admit to 26 million. In talking with the PR people from Chrisman, the developer, and also from the accident fund themselves, the best they'll tell you is that they can't estimate very well, but it's tens of millions. And you know, in this era when they're busy coming for my Social Security and getting rid of firemen and EMTs and teachers, I keep thinking to myself, how many millions is it worth it to keep that in town? It's not going to go to another state. It's a subsidiary of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, so it's not really going to set up shop in Indiana. I mean, it could move to, you know, Iron Mountain, I guess, but I don't think that's very likely. I think they'd probably stay in the area. And that's, you know, a few hundred jobs, but you have to question after a while, Bill, don't you? How much are you giving away to get something?
I think you should know what your return on investment is.
Right.
That's a bottom line, and then you can judge. It's, you know, and you mentioned a little bit about what EMTs and firefighters cost. There's a millage coming in
Yes.
not very long, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I don't really know any details. I mean, it's a similar kind of thing. Maybe there is a responsibility of government to tell people what things cost and let us judge.
We do need greater transparency. One of the things that I'm finding out, the more and more I'm doing some digging, is that, yes, indeed, they keep talking about how, well, the United States has such a high corporate tax rate compared to other countries. Yeah, but nobody pays it. You know, if you take a look at Bank of America and GE and all these other corporations, they pay zero in tax. Sometimes they get tax rebates. So it really doesn't matter what the rate is if you're not paying it. Make it 99% if you're not going to pay it. Yeah.
If I was paying it, I'd want to talk to my accountant. I think we find out what's going wrong.
Well, here's one of the more interesting things coming up on a tax shift that's coming up, I believe, in the change from the Michigan business tax to this new tax that Governor Snyder wants to put in place. The Michigan business tax, basically, the first $350,000, you don't register for the Michigan business tax. Once they get rid of that and replace this with this new tax, I don't care if you're doing nails out at the mall, you're going to be paying that 6% or 6.5% or whatever it is, whatever they end up at, you're going to be paying that on the first dollar of profit that you make. So it's really a tax shift. The Michigan business tax was really on larger corporations, many of whom did have their little friends in the legislature get them loopholes. But the small business person was really not affected by that tax, and now they will be.
Oh, and I think once they learn, I think once you file your income tax, whenever it is next year, you're gonna have everyone's gonna have some surprises.
How is that tax coming? I haven't heard much about I was talking with somebody today who was kind of in the know, and they were telling me that the legislature is looking at different formulas, that they're going to try to adjust this a bit.
I think it's in flux, because, and part of that was the pension.
The pension issue, taxing pensions, you think that may be the piece that ends up being adjusted?
But ultimately, if they reduce business taxes, they still have to come up with 1 point something billion dollars. So somewhere it has to come from.
So there'll be no give in this tax giveaway to the corporations, the reduction in corporate taxes. That's not on the table for discussion?
Doesn't appear to be right now with Snyder anyway. He doesn't want to negotiate that at all.
Well, one of the things we will see this Wednesday is there's another rally at the Capitol organized by the unions who are concerned about the new passel of bills on their way through the legislature with collective bargaining. I wonder, you know, it'd be nice if we had an 80-degree day, but I don't know if at least we get 60. Maybe we'll get a few people out there. We're not seeing as much activity out of states like Wisconsin anymore in terms of the rallies. What they've done is switch their tactics to recalls.
Right. There's been discussion of that here, but I haven't really seen anything serious. Maybe I've missed it.
The big question
is
here,
heavy lifting.
Well, I think the real question here is, will the Democratic Party commit to a recall? Are they just interested in their jobs in 2012, or are they interested in stopping these bills before they get passed? And that would require a recall. That would sort of strike the fear of God into a few legislators' hearts, I think, if they saw those petitions being circulated in their communities. But it seems the Dems have been fairly silent on that so far.
I think that's their strategy, was 2012. If some outsider group comes in and wants to do a recall, fine, but who's going to fund it?
We had a video from the We Are One rally, the MLK rally at the Capitol, and Michael Dudley, who's an attorney in East Lansing, has plans with his friends to start circulating petitions in July, but I don't think they realize some of the hurdles. You have to get all your wording approved first by the courts before you can start circulating any recall
Right,
petition. It can get expensive.
by the Secretary of State, and then there's usually litigation.
Yeah. So it'll take a while for any effort like that to happen.
I think so. If I had to guess, I'd say it's not going to happen at any level. There's not going to be a recall.
Well, one of the good things, and we'll transition now into introducing, we have two guests this evening. We have Rob South from WKAR. Greetings, Rob.
Thank you for having me in.
We have Malik Angus from a new publication in town, online publication called Man Up. It's a magazine, an online magazine, and he's been publishing that. Rob just did a feature on online media in the community that came out on the WKAR website and was on the radio today, looking at what's happening. I think that's really an important question related to these issues we've been talking about. We have a lot of serious issues in the state. Who's covering them?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question. You know, one of the things you said earlier was that you didn't feel that some of these tax incentives that these companies are getting are very transparent. They're transparent, but nobody's reporting them. They're very complicated deals, and really they have to be because of the nature of the business. But you're right, no one really has the ability to dig really deep and see exactly what they're all about. Now, I'm not going to defend everything that the developers and the politicians do as being transparent, but I think that one of the biggest problems we have in getting information about what tax incentives, like what happened with the accident fund and the Ottawa Street Power Station, I think the biggest problem is there aren't any reporters in town who have the capacity to really report that and take the time to really dig deep and find out what all those numbers are and what they mean. It's just you have to have, not only do you have to have the information, but you also have to have the knowledge of how those structures work. And I can't think of anyone that we have in town who could do that very thoroughly.
When I moved here many years ago, there were almost 40 people in the newsroom at LSJ, and that's a long gone. I mean, now what we're seeing, unfortunately, is very few reporters in the newsroom doing a lot of different kind of stories. I guess the bellwether for me, as I was looking at, the Detroit News had the money to send somebody to live tweet and live blog the Charlie Sheen show in Detroit.
No, be careful there. That was a friend of mine. Full disclosure.
I don't mean to be a real creep about this.
They
Yes,
sent
I
a
do. Yes, I do.
photographer, by the way, too.
And they sent a photographer, too, so they could get a picture. They don't have any time to dig into how many millions of your tax dollars are being shoveled out the door, but by God, they can send somebody to Charlie Sheen. That's the kind of thing that worries me about priorities.
That's, well, that's commercial media for you.
Aha, so explain to me, this is a perfect lead-in. Now you can do your picture wide public media
I
with
didn't know I was gonna be pitching for
WKAR.
public media. Well, you know how WKAR, we're a public radio station, and we broadcast national public radio news. We're non-commercial, we're non-profit. Like any non-profit organization, we are not allowed to make a profit by law. And so the priorities that we have are, you know, much more community-oriented than they are profit-oriented. So we're really looking at news and information as opposed to making money. Now, that oversimplifies it a great deal, but if I was in the position of the Detroit Free Press, I might say, well, you know, we're going to get more hits from Charlie Sheen tweet than we are from, you know, tweeting the downtown rally. Well, which one is more important? I would hope most people would think the downtown rally, whichever side they're on. Public radio, public broadcasting, we had people down there. Rick Pluta and Laura Weber are our Capitol correspondents, and they were down there. We had a few other people who would drive down periodically to pick up sound when we needed to. So we tried to pick up some of that slack. But again, you know, public radio has always had very small news staffs, and so we don't have the ability to pick it all up, and certainly don't have the ability to do the kind of in-depth reporting that a big newspaper like the Free Press or the News or even the Lansing State Journal could have done in the past or could do today.
One of the things that media like Lansing Online News and Malik with your Man Up is you kind of pick and choose your targets. You can't cover it all. I mean, I'm not trying to cover breaking news. We're not trying to do that.
Right.
If we happen to be driving by and something interesting is going on, we'll leap out with our camera or our flip cam and grab something. and something that specifically interests us, but we have to pick and choose our targets. I guess the hope is that there's be this overall mosaic of media in the community. What kinds of issues resonate with you and the ones that you want Man Up to cover?
Well, Man Up has a mission statement that is on their original publication, and they wanted to first fill a void that I think was found with the Lansing area that has publications for women that serve their purpose, but there wasn't a publication that was locally produced for men, geared towards men of basically any the average guy. There's a business publication. If you're into want to learn more about business, I think that's a very good publication, Greater Lansing Business Monthly.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're looking for something
Lansing Capital Gains is online.
Correct. But if you're looking for something that has entertainment, information that's beyond business, there's a void there. So I found some people that were interested in that, and we wanted to entertain, educate, and teach men how to live an attainable lifestyle.
Attainable.
Well, if you look at GQ or Esquire magazine, and you read
It's not attainable.
you read those articles, and then you look at the ad to the left for a $2,000 jacket.
Mm.
You might say, well, I thought I made a decent living, but apparently I'm not living up to what.
I've been trying to find that staple in my stomach, like Playboy. Speaking of unattainable.
Yeah. Every Sunday in the New York Times, the first section has ads like that, and I always look to see the prices. A $4,000 purse, a $3,000 wallet.
That was so
Well,
funny.
I work in public radio, and so of course I have the money to do that. Wait, no, that's wrong.
I guess not.
Well, I understand there's a reason that those ads can afford to be in those publications because they're national publications, and that's what they, can charge as, their ad rates is for 100,000, copies, and they know that publication is going to be lying around in somebody's something, and it's going to be picked up and seen.
4
by
to 6
somebody.
people will see.
Well, yeah. So,
Okay.
but something like themanupmag.com is going to be more geared towards, everybody.
Yeah.
It's to inform everybody about the great things about the Lansing area.
Well, I got a survey once recently from Vanity Fair asking me to fill this out because I'm one of their subscribers. And I went and they wanted to know, about what kind of cars I liked and what kind of watches, thinking Rolex and Bulgaris and all these. And I'm thinking, they should pay me not to take this. I'm going to ruin their demographic. They want to be able to prove to people that it's only, folks over a couple $100,000 a
There's
year.
no questions about hoop houses?
No questions about hoop houses.
They throw those out.
The little peepers in the backyard. That was, it's the kind of stuff that we cover. I go out and do peepers on Saturday night because somebody mentions peepers on Facebook, and I've got them screaming like crazy over in the pond, so I can go out with my camera, grab that, go put it up.
I think that's what's great about local media is, people like Malik have the opportunity to put forward a magazine like that. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be fancy. They can do it however they want to do it. And it gives a local feel, a local flavor, and it has plenty of opportunity to grow without the real risk of, running out of money.
Well, there's that.
Unfortunately, and we talked about this in the piece that I did for the radio, was that nobody's really making a lot of money.
Right.
But it doesn't really cost any money to do it either. So there's sort of this give and take there. It's very inexpensive and accessible, but at the same time, at some point, people like me, I make a living writing.
Yes.
I can't give that up to start my own webpage. So
The cost of access of buy-in to be able to open your own online publication is so low.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I was 5 years old when we got our first TV, and no matter how much I wanted to, I couldn't have got my own TV station when I grew up. We didn't have that kind of money, But I will tell you, however, that our technical budget has tripled this year for Lansing Online, as it went from 5 a month to 15. This was a whopping expenditure for us. We went to a whole new server because we're actually getting so many hits we can't use a shared server anymore, and we've got to start getting a little bit more server capacity. But for $15 a month, we can raise hell, have fun, do all sorts of fun stuff, engage a lot of different people with different walks of life, young and old. We had Santos Ramos, who I hope will be joining us next Monday. He works out at the Travelers Club, and he's starting a new online publication called Citizens Communique, and he writes for us as well. And then we have at the other end of the spectrum people who are retired. So we've got young and old, different people. Where do you find your writers, Malik?
Just by general conversation with my frustration and finding other people that were just as frustrated as I was. And what ended up happening is that people came on board because they had basically a hobby or something that they really enjoyed doing that was outside of their normal making money to pay the mortgage thing. And so that's what brought us all together. But you know, you were talking about the ease of it, and you were talking about the cost of it, and you're talking about the accessibility of it. But what I found was been interesting is that learning curve. Basically, we were very excited and very exuberated, and then when we started building stuff and building websites, I've noticed a few mistakes. You know, and so one of those things that we have to get past is like, all right, we want to focus that this is content driven, and that's what we want people to realize. We want to make it very simple for people to navigate the website, and in a simplistic form is not what necessarily is seen on websites today. And websites, it might have 3 columns, and there's lots of stuff, and there's flash, and there's video, and there's, you know, lots of links, and people are looking at this the manupmag.com, and they're like, well, that's too simple, it's boring, it's not exciting. And I'm like, well, but the information is
Haven't you
still there.
seen the new look for the LSJ? It looks like anybody else's blog. We
Yeah.
were a year or two ahead of our design. Actually looks a lot like it.
And that's exactly it. You know, the websites have changed.
Yeah.
You know, and
They're fashions.
Yeah, and the fashion has changed, the style has changed, and stuff like that. What we decided at the manupmag.com is to simplify all of that, and just put the information out there and try to make it, you know, so you can get the information, you can get the meat, and then add some pictures and bling and stuff like that, but not have it overbearing.
You're listening to WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. You know, one of the challenges that we have with Lansing Online News, we view the publication as a laboratory for experiments, so that's why we will do things like embed the player so that you can go there and watch our live webcast. We've got our poetry Twitter feed. We've got all kinds of little niceties that we can throw up there. But, you know, that's kind of hard because we've had a few times where if you have a glitch, and I'm busy teaching, and Bill's busy, I mean, it might not get fixed for a few hours, and that's not quite Amazon.com reliability uptime.
Well, I'm not sure of that. If you've ever used Amazon.
But on the flip side, though, if you do need to change something, you can immediately. You don't have to go through a board of directors or talk to a president or speak to a manager or something. Well, you might have that. But you know,
we have that problem all the time. You know, in the problem that we have with our service is that we do have to go through the bureaucracy to get things changed, and to make new things on you know, anything different.
Yes,
so
you have
that
a lot of
is
people who have to sign off.
now that has its pluses and minuses.
Sure.
I mean, for one thing, it's quality control. For another thing, it reduces the amount of experimentation that you can actually do, and there have been times when I thought it didn't serve the best purpose for us. Now, of course, I get voted down by my bosses. That's okay. That's their job to say, Rob, I don't think that's going to be appropriate. It's not going to fly. And you know, maybe they're right, and that's all right. But you're right. You know, with Malik, if it's not working, you can try something different.
well, and that's what I have. You actually have the old version. You have the March version that you're looking at, and that was one of the mistakes that we had when you linked to our website. It was updated, but incorrectly. So your link does not necessarily update to the current page like it's supposed to. And that's a learning curve that we had because, see, now you have the current issue, which has completely different style and feel than what you saw
It's
before.
totally different, yeah.
It's completely different.
I like that, Malik. That is
That's
wonderful.
That's quality control for you. The general public spoke. And there was a lot of complaints about what was originally
That's
thing,
true.
and they're like, you know what? Don't like it. It's boring. It's ugly. We got that. We listened. We still maintain the simplistic style, but in a way that kind of melded what is with old and what's
looks
new.
elegant.
And that's what we're trying to do with what it is. So yeah, we you know, I said you don't have a board of directors to go through, but we also have to deal with the general public that says if I don't like the site, I'm not going to go back. There's too much stuff out there,
Right.
you know. So
Well, we have a board of directors. I say to Bill, "Hey, Bill, can I grab this?"
What do you think? I don't know. Yeah.
but it's a problem. That's what I say about the learning curve. You were able to immediately update that link to your webpage, the Lansing Online News. You made a link to the manupmag.com.
Right.
The problem was I did an update incorrectly, so it does not
It
give the
didn't lead to
current
the right place.
Right.
Yeah.
You see
Yeah.
the problem. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
it's cool, it's awesome, it's great, but it's also, you were talking about earlier that you can write, you can be okay at writing, but you don't have to be great. You can be okay at video, you don't have to be great, you can still put that up there, but if you do, and you do it incorrectly too often, people are not going to come back.
Oh, yeah. And one of the things I'm going to give Rob a hard time about, by the way,
Okay.
because I suspect this is one of the rules he can't change yet, but that you should. I think one of the biggest differences between old media and new media in town is that people like me and Malik will have a gazillion links in a story
Yeah.
to other publications.
Yes.
I mean,
That's
I
right.
wrote, I took City Pulse to task for putting out that special issue that didn't question some of the
Sure.
funding, gave them a hard time about it. And I linked directly to the City Pulse story. Now, I noticed that the State Journal, even though they insist that they do this, they really don't. They don't link to other local publications. And I understand that for Gannett's competitive model is we don't want to send people elsewhere. The reality, of course, is that cross-linking is part of what helps everybody move up in the search engine, so I don't see why it's really a downside. But I noticed that a lot of your copy has no links in it. There are rules like that that are hard to get changed sometimes.
Well, I'll tell you, and that is part of it. The rules don't get changed. The other part of it is that we don't have a lot of staff,
I see.
and so even though Malik had a problem that we had the wrong link, or I had mentioned the wrong link, and so you might say, well, that'd be nice to link that, but then that's extra work for me or for our web guy or for somebody else to do. I don't mean to dismiss, when we try to make corrections to mistakes, but if we're linking copy, that can take you might think it might take an extra 5 minutes or so. Well, if I've been working on a story for, 16 hours and trying to get stuff done, it's like the last thing I want to do for 5 minutes is link a story.
Sure.
Now, that being said,
Now, I
we
do links in 30 seconds. Rob.
yeah.
Don't give me that 5
You,
minutes.
it's 30 seconds. For me, it's
Oh, I
5
see.
minutes.
And for me, since I'm new, it's been 10 to 15 minutes to make sure it's right.
And you get faster. Now, I have to ask, Rob, do you use a WordPress format?
No, we don't.
No,
And there's
they have a
that thing.
proprietary
That-
format
that's
clunky.
we have a proprietary
Yeah, that's
format,
the
and it
difference.
is very clunky, and we all complain about it. And it does not. There's no automatic formatting. So if we do bold, we have to put in the code. If we do links, we have to put in the code. If we do italics, we have to put in the code. And it can take a while.
I'll bet it does.
And like I said, after you've worked, that long on a story, and my bosses are thinking, I've heard this before from Rob. I've spent all day on a story. The last thing I want to do is try to get the details right on the code. Somebody else should take that over. But those are things that we have to work on.
I apologize for my email to you earlier, but
Okay,
As I was looking at, I'm very fascinated with the Freedom Rider story, and I noticed I could see like 10 links right now that
It
just
would be
popped
fun
in
to
my-
have, yeah.
There's some incredible
historic-
video of like
yeah.
Siegenthaler, who was
John Siegenthaler.
yeah,
right.
JFK's aide on the site.
Yeah.
It's amazing stuff.
Well, one of the things I discovered too is that when you link to original sources, your viewers or visitors will go and check out those sources. And there have been times they've caught me where I've actually misinterpreted some of the material that I was linking
Sure.
to. And that's really a great check on everything. You basically, what we're looking at is an infinitely revisable article online that can be crowdsourced. I wish that we were able to do more of that. I think as the community becomes more sophisticated about things, we'll be able to ask them more questions and get more direct feedback.
And they will be able to provide links
Oh yeah, absolutely.
directly. That's what I'd like to see happen.
And see, I don't want anybody to find out how wrong I am.
One of the other nicer things too about not having, your article focuses quite a bit on who's making any money
Right.
at this, what are the economic models, which to my mind in some ways is not always the most interesting question.
Right, and I'll tell you why I did that. I mean,
Yeah.
we just started our new project, Reworking Michigan. We've had this project
Yeah.
up for a year, and then just this month we're doing that on a regular basis, every Monday on Morning Edition. Here's my plug, 90.5, at 5:35 and 7:35, you can hear a Reworking Michigan program. And that was one of the programs we put in there. So the focus of the story had to be on economics.
Right.
The other side of that story is definitely about, local media, what's happening, people getting information that they couldn't have gotten before. people like, Malik, who's doing media now, and 10 years ago, that would have been out of Malik's reach, even if he wanted to, even if he was a skilled writer. I'm not saying you're not, but it would have been, there's just no way.
It's a very valid point. And even when I was doing TV 10 years ago or 12 years ago now, I had to depend on somebody else to do that.
Yeah.
I had to depend on another business to be able to put up supply the equipment,
Yes.
the airwaves, and all
Yes.
that stuff. Now I had an hour that I could say whatever I wanted to say, but I was dependent upon them. Once they left, once that game left, and they took their ball and went elsewhere, I was done. My voice was gone.
Mhm.
Same thing happened to me with From Left Field in East Lansing at WELM. I was doing public access TV there, and I want you to know I'm very proud of this fact. I was probably the only person kicked off public access TV.
Some might say for good reason.
It's only
It's a little
surprising.
edgy.
It was only surprising it wasn't for what I did on air. They posted 11 pages of new rules on the wall, and I wrote "rules suck" in magic marker across the bottom. And they tried to have me arrested for trespass. And they wanted me out of there so badly that they were even willing to have me arrested for trespass and defacing their rules. So.
Well, I remember the early days of public access, and I don't think you were the only one who
No.
violated the rules. So. Well, there were no rules.
Although I miss Chicken Man, we had a consistent caller for a fraternity, and he would change his voice every week, and I was always get suckered in, and he'd start out with a real thoughtful comment about politics or something, and the story always ended up with some new way to decapitate chickens.
Wow.
So
Creative.
That was the fun of public access.
it was. I was teaching in a journalism class as a guest lecturer a few years later, and a kid in the back of the room put up his hand and he said, "You might remember me. I'm Chicken Man." So I did get to meet
That's
Chicken
funny.
Man. Yeah.
Fantastic.
You know, when I was listening and watching your story today, I thought of not the Lansing State Journal, but the Ann Arbor News,
Mhm.
Yeah.
which has just transformed that community
Sure.
by not having a newspaper.
Right.
But they just laid off an additional 14 workers, journalists, and it was based primarily on what people read online.
So it's on eyeballs.
It's on eyeballs, totally. That's what they based it on.
So
People aren't
it's Charlie
reading-
Sheen.
They're not reading community news anymore.
Right.
They dropped their community news reporters.
Yeah.
And I
But the
thought,
problem with that
wow.
is when people are going to want to know what's going on in their community, that's going to shift.
I thought that was really short.
But that may be a niche for a publication like yours to fulfill the need for a specific community. We may have a specific niche that we fill. I mean, maybe those are the kinds of things better done by people in the neighborhoods. I know that one of the first exposures I had to this whole idea was a guy in Wicker Park who was the neighborhood crank. And somebody made the mistake of giving this guy a flip camera, right? Anytime a 911 call appeared and there was an ambulance or a fire truck or a police car, he'd run out with that flip cam. And he would be able to post on his blog or YouTube within an hour or so. And it got to the point where, I mean, he just covered the community. He was a retired guy. He loved to do it. That's maybe not something that an LSJ could ever afford to do.
Yeah. Well, but the other side of that is who does really good in-depth community news, and we're seeing a loss of that. And that's really important.
And that
There
was
is-
one of the questions that drove the manupmag.com. I'm working on a piece from the Lansing Symphony Orchestra, and the only reason why it isn't done is because of the length of interviews that I've done
Yeah.
and the number of interviews that
Yeah.
I've done. I'm also working on another piece on Pat Gillespie, and the only reason why it's done, I have 4 hours worth of tape to go through in order to put this article together because I want it to be in depth. I don't want it just to be a 2-page fluff and stuff.
And I think Malik's doing a great job with that. But without being paid, he's going to do it a couple of times. He's going to realize how much work it is, and he's going to do it again. And without having some reputation already in place for reporting, people might not look at the Man Up Mag and say, I know that all that's accurate because they do good reporting.
Here's where I'll disagree with you a little bit, though. I mean, let's face it, we all sort of wax eloquent about the good old days of all the great investigative reporting that was done in this community. When was that?
Well, I don't know that it was.
Can you start
Ever.
tell me the top 10 really in-depth investigative multi-series pieces we ever saw in this community in the past?
If you do have people who are paying attention to the issues and can do reports on some of the more general things. We've done stories on brownfield redevelopment
Yeah.
for WKR. We've done a lot. I've
No,
done a
you've
lot
done
of
good
stories.
stuff.
That's really boring
But the,
stuff.
but the commercial press
and-
doesn't touch
right,
that. They
the
didn't
commercial
touch
press
that when they
won't
were
do that.
making money.
And I got to tell you, Malik won't touch it either because he's going to walk into it, and he's going to walk into it and he goes, "This is really boring stuff, and I don't have the time to do it, and I'm not going to take the time to do it." Whereas if you're getting paid to do it, you're going to sit down and actually take the time to understand it, and then take the time to write and report something that other people can understand.
Let me suggest that the press never had the capacity to be the real counterweight and watchdog of government that it would have needed to have been as strong as government. I mean, government is
Well, that's-
tens of thousands of people running around with fully paid jobs doing things, and we have a small handful of people trying to find out what they're doing. So it's always been disproportionate, and we've always had to pick and choose our targets. I think the difference is a nonprofit model has certain advantages, as you've discussed, because you're not as dependent on your advertisers. I mean, I tell my journalism students, don't look for that article in Runner's World that I used to write for. I used to write for Runner's World. Don't look for that article on you can buy a really great pair of shoes for $10. They're not going to run that article.
Right.
They're not going to run don't buy Nikes because of the sweatshops. Not going to be their cover story. I mean, we have always had a problem with the paid media. The question is, can some people do it for labor of love in the community? Other people do it with a nonprofit model. Other people do it for profit. And through the mix, can the community end up okay?
I think you'll always have that mix. I think when it comes to hard news and hard journalism, you're going to have to find people who are paid to do it. It isn't necessarily because it is so hard. But because, I mean, I like it.
But you're paid,
I
but
love
you're
what I
paid
do.
by a nonprofit. You're not paid by a commercial.
But I still make a living.
Yeah, exactly.
But I really enjoy what I do. I mean, don't get me wrong. I go to work every day and I feel really good about it.
Yeah.
Well, most days. But if I won the lottery, I'd be out the door.
Really?
I wouldn't do it.
I
I'd
lay
be
there at
gone.
night and think about
And
if
you
I won the
start a
lottery.
local news site?
I
We
may.
start
Yeah.
an online publication.
But,
Rob's World.
The motivation.
I like it.
Yeah, Rob's World. Excellent.
I read that on Facebook every night.
The reality of it is, I don't always feel like working.
No one does. No one does, really.
So I think if you have a nonprofit, if you have a model where nobody's getting paid to do it, the people who don't feel like working have nothing to lose by not doing it.
There are so many new ways to, I mean, I was sort of disturbed by what Mickey Hurton was talking about the fact that there is no good online economic model. Not as long as you keep the print edition alive. Because the print edition is actually your competition to your online edition. You're selling the same product in two different formats. One is relatively cheap to get out there. Let's face it, that server cost is going almost down to zero nowadays. It's really not a major expense. But those trucks, those printing presses, all of the stuff to support your paper edition, there are plenty of economists who say that the New York Times is in competing with itself. If they killed off their print edition, they'd be making money. Their online edition would make money. It's the huge cost of that print edition that really helped drag you down.
Well, we don't even have the print to contend with. I mean, our biggest expense is the electric bill for broadcast.
Yes.
And technology.
Technology, the transformer.
Besides that, it's the people, and
Yeah.
you have to. Of course, you have to have people that can fix the equipment, that can work the equipment, and things like that. But they still have to be paid.
Yeah, I'm not arguing this. We're not going for your job tonight, Rob. We're not trying to get you on board here.
I think Malik would be ecstatic if he was making a decent living writing for themanupmag.com. I think
Even if it was a part-time wage, that would
Yeah.
make things, a lot.
There is Clay Shirky in his book Cognitive Surplus talks about the reality, however, that when people do things as a labor of love, they're willing to work really hard, really long for nothing. There are bands out there whose fans, for example, started online communities where they raise money for different causes, and nobody gets paid. Then the same band turned around and did a paid jobs in a foundation and set it up that way, totally different vibe. There is a lot of volunteer spirit out in the community, and if you can tap into that, there's nothing wrong with a mix that includes both. We have to have paid journalists, but we also, I think, have to have people who really have a passion for this. We've got Wes Thorpe doing his Lansing blog.
Oh yeah.
He's a retired journalist from town, and he just loves
Highly
this stuff.
credible.
I'm
Well,
glad Wes is there.
Yeah.
I mean, he picks up the slack where we
fine, yeah,
couldn't do it. So.
The problem that I'm having is that I have these wonderful men that are interested in becoming a part of this, but when you redline their article, and when you say that maybe they should change their format a little bit,
The role of the editor.
and then they go, well, I don't know if I really have time to do this. that does come up. So, I mean, I'm kind of in that middle ground where, I'm working with a bunch of people that, we hope to be able to make enough to have some type of payback, even if it's minimal. But until then, I'm starting off with that labor of love and that excitement, like, I told you, it's kind of like when they have a bad day, you know what, they're saying is, I'm not getting paid to do this. Or when their wife is sick, they're like, you know what, I don't have time to do this, I need to take care of her, because she's going to look at me like, why am I putting that much energy into something that you're not even paying diapers for?
You're listening to WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We've always had the rule, too, Rob, and this is one of these days it's going to mean that I lose my house because somebody sues me, and dear readers, please decide not to do that. We don't edit people, a lot. And one of the things I always did was, for example, for 2.5 years I blogged for free on politics for the Detroit News because they let me just put up what I put up, right? I was disappointed that they didn't label people like John LaPlante, who was being paid to do that from the Mackinac Center, right? He was getting paid for writing those by the Mackinac Center. They didn't label those as paid contributions, so I was kind of resentful that John was getting a paycheck for those. I was doing it because we lefties, we do all this stuff for free. And the rights got money, so it didn't make. But then the day came where I did...
On public radio, we don't.
The day came when I put up an article that was called A Field Guide to the Tea Party Crazies. And I treated them like various strains of birds, just sort of like a field guide for birds. And I had, the wacko eagles, the super patriots and all this kind of thing. And I sent somebody to it an hour later, and it wasn't there anymore. The editor had decided to pull it.
Oh.
Well, that was the last time I blogged for free. I said, those are the deal. I'll blog for free for all this time, but boy, when you start doing things like pulling something because it hit a vein or hit a nerve, then I don't write for you anymore.
Well, that's something that I'm going to have to deal with because I was let go from one publication for a difference of opinion, and it's something that with working with these people, I said, hey, if we don't agree, that doesn't mean it's not going to go up. If we don't agree, that's probably a good thing. That means it's getting that difference of opinion out there, and it's not going to be this one voice. And that's the other thing too. If there's anything that's a commentary, it's going to be it's going to be labeled as such. But then we'll try to find the counter to that, and that's another thing that we want to grow into is be able to have that ability to put that different voice out there and let it speak.
And see, we don't do any editorializing or commentary.
Yeah.
Much to some people would disagree with some of my reports, but we can't by law. It's written in our rules that we can't do any editorializing. Now, as far as people working for free, I think what I would say to Malik is, what I tell my interns, what I tell my students is, when I go through and edit with you, I'm not going to do anything to make your story worse.
Right.
I want to make it better. And so we go through some pretty intense editing sessions, and I tell them all the time, look, this is probably one of the hardest edits you're going to get, but it's going to make you a better writer. If it makes you a better writer, you're going to have a better job. And that's where you eventually want to be. So, when people say to me, I don't want to be edited, I'm like, well, then,
well, they once asked Joan Didion, who certainly no slouch as an author, why it was she wrote for the Saturday Evening Post, of all places, and she said, because they don't even change a comma.
But that's Joan Didion. And,
exactly.
When you're Joan Didion, and I've had students, mention things like that to me before, and I say, look, when you're a millionaire, when you're really out there being published, you can say any bad thing you want to about my editor.
I don't know that that's the mark of success, though, because maybe they're that good now. Not many of my students
not many,
are. But Karen is. Karen,
there are some good
she's that good. I never had to touch Karen's guy.
I didn't like the editing process when I first began writing, but I did realize the quality of my work was only turned to great or really good because of that editor, because I was challenged. And that's something that I was trying to share with the people that I'm working with that were writing for the first time and got their first red line. I had to have phone calls with these people. They took it personal. I'm like, I'm not attacking your work.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make it better.
I've had good editors and I've had bad editors. I think we've all experienced that.
Yeah, people take it personally. Depending on who the editor is, and that's hard. I tell my students all the time, and I would tell people who are writing for any online publication, take it all with a grain of salt. Some of it's going to be good, some of it's going to be bad. Don't take it personally. Because then you'll have difficulty taking in the good stuff.
Best editor I ever had. I wrote an op-ed piece for New York Newsday many years ago, and the woman did line-by-line editing with me over the telephone. And this woman was a genius. She got 250 words out of a story and I would swear to God, I don't know how she did it, it was magic. She was able to shrink it to fit the space. It said everything I wanted to say and more.
Yeah.
She was
Exactly.
just brilliant at
Yeah.
it. And that's,
And I don't-
that's such a
yeah,
rare
that's
skill.
that
I don't
is.
have that mind. I use the word succinct, but I can't practice it.
But as a former runner-up Ohio State spelling champ, I can spell it, but that doesn't mean it's
Bonnie, as you know, I read a lot of books a week
Yes.
because that's part of what I do. And the role of editor has diminished incredibly, let me tell you.
Well, that's true in the whole
And
industry, hasn't it?
Yeah.
You could have this incredible book if it had an editor. If
Well-
it just had an editor, it would be a magnificent book. Without
So
the
you've been reading
editor,
Stephen King?
yeah.
I mean, I always tell people.
Dean Koontz.
Yeah.
Dean Koontz. Oh,
People joke about my spelling online, on Facebook and things, and I always tell people spelling and writing are two
Yes.
entirely different skills.
Yes, they are.
And writing and editing are two different skills. And so, some people have, a good writer is going to have a mix of all of that. But I think that,
Bonnie Jo Campbell talked about the fact that she hired an editor, paid $30 an hour, which was hard for her to do. I mean, book authors don't make that much,
yeah.
especially before she kind of hit the big time.
And this is for her new
she said
book,
that was
yeah.
really worth it. There was just
I can't edit. I would be the first to admit it. And people that have known my writing for over the years have sent me stuff and said, "Will you edit this?" And I'm like, "No." The only reason why I'm in those publications is because I have an editor.
Yeah, in fact, I've just sent 2 local authors to editors because they've got really pretty darn good books, but boy, it's going to take several hundred hours of editing, frankly. Now,
That's-
whether they're willing to pay for that, I don't know.
Well, one of the things you wanted to talk about tonight, I should probably try to remember to get that in. You wanted to talk about the Kennedy assassination.
Oh, the
because
Kennedy
speaking
detail.
of a badly edited book, I
Have you
read.
read it?
No, I read one of the books from somebody who was alleging that Lyndon Baines Johnson did it. Oh, it was.
Oh, I just saw that book. Oh, that's awful.
It's
Well,
horrible.
yeah, there's a new book. Well, it's not new. It's about a year old. It's called The Kennedy Detail. But the author, Gerald Blaine, was a Secret Service agent.
Uh-huh.
He will be here a week from Tuesday. And Gerald Blaine wrote the first book based on the Secret Service agents' on-site observations. They've kept quiet for nearly 50 years.
Did they have much new to reveal?
No. Can I say that? Can I say that? But their first person, the way they observed those things is interesting
Okay.
because they were there. They were sworn to protect the president. It all went very badly. Now the one that really does have the details is Bugliosi.
Vincent Bugliosi,
Yeah,
former
that book,
LA prosecutor.
1,600 pages. He
Yeah.
debunks everybody's deal. Now I did not know about that book until over the weekend. I did not read.
Gerald
that book.
Posner did another job on that as well. But yeah, that's very, very interesting.
But yeah, there's hundreds of conspiracy theorist books. But I think it would be interesting to see these individuals because they were on the site. Doug Roberts, who runs Institute of Social Research and whatever the heck it is, it's IPSPR or
IPSR.
something. Yeah, something
Yeah.
like that. His father was a Secret Service agent.
Oh, really?
Now, just
On that
listen-
detail?
On that detail, he was in the car behind him.
Oh, wow.
And just talking to him about what went through his father's mind, now that was more important to me, to see what his reaction was, what he did. His spouse went that night and picked him up at the White House.
Wow.
That's the kind of jobs they had. The one car family went down and picked up the Secret Service guy who just saw Kennedy shot that day.
Did you watch the Kennedy series on the
No.
Reels channel? I did.
No.
I thought it was quite good, actually. I mean, it certainly. I'm sure the Kennedy family was less than thrilled. There was a bit of muckraking in it in that sense. But again, it gets one of the things that's so difficult. I mean, for journalists, is that in real time you don't know all that. You can only cover what you're seeing in front of you. And the true story of the Kennedys when it came out was so much more complex. Everything from mob ties to Castro assassination attempts, all the things that come out later. I'd be interested, Rob, knowing that. I mean, where did you learn? Did you start it with broadcast, radio, print,
The mob.
the mob?
No,
Trained
you're
by the
asking me
mob.
about my career,
Yeah.
where I started. I always was interested in doing radio and news, and I couldn't write because I didn't have a word processor. And I tell people that my father-in-law one day, while we were moving, dropped my typewriter down 3 flights of stairs and broke it, and it forced me to buy a word processor. and it was like the doors opened wide. I could suddenly write. But I got my start in broadcasting in Station Ann Arbor, WPZA, doing overnight news, and then from there I kind of grew into something more.
Because one of the things that I'm so aware of now is it's so different to do storytelling for the ear, storytelling for the
Yeah.
eye, storytelling for the written word for the
Sure.
brain. Being able to master all of those equally well is not easy.
Well, I don't know that I have them all. I mean, we just started doing video production,
Yeah.
and so I've been writing for video, which is very new to me, and I'm glad we have some decent video producers. Jason Vlahos, who's my cameraman and producer at WKAR, does an excellent job and has helped me understand what we need to put in and what we don't need to put in to make it a good video story.
Yes.
So that's been very helpful. But you're right, I mean, there are different styles. And primarily I've done radio, but that's a good, I always think that that's the best style, because we have to be descriptive, like you would in newspaper. But you also have the opportunity to use sound and to use other elements that you wouldn't get to use.
Malik, how are you able to recruit people who have multimedia skills? Video, slideshows?
I've had experience with that personally. So if it comes to pass that we would want to do that, I do know that, and so hopefully we'll be able to add that to our mix. That was one of the goals, is to be able to put video and tell a story through video as well on the website.
The story you told today, for example,
Mhm.
Rob, it includes the audio track from what went out on the radio. It's got the text piece. It's got
Yeah.
the video piece.
Right.
So people get the story from so many different
Sure.
angles.
When we struggle with that too, and we had a meeting about that today on, how do we differentiate the radio script from what we're going to put online. We're still working on that, by the way. I mean, it's not by any means a perfect thing, and that's more work that we have to do.
Yeah.
And when you have a staff of 5, I mean, we only have 5 reporters in our shop, and all of us have something else to do. It's not
Right.
like we're just reporters. It's very difficult to say, okay, well, instead of writing it this way, you have to write it that way. So it can be a lot of work, and putting together a video story is another layer entirely.
Oh, it certainly is. Trying to figure out how you show rather than tell.
And then, people who follow me on Facebook are familiar with the fact that I don't like to transcribe anything. And so, but that's part of my job too, is I have to transcribe all of these scripts and put all this stuff
Dragon
in.
speaking naturally. That's what I use. It'll
Maybe
technologically
we have to
do
try
it for
that,
you.
yeah.
Well,
Well,
I know
look
you're
at us.
running out of time. I want to thank
Yeah.
you for having me
Thank
on,
you,
Tommy.
Malik.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Rob. We're
thanks
going to be
again,
joined
Rob.
now by 2 guests talking a bit about the upcoming Capital City Film Festival. Can you give me your names and tell me a little bit about the festival?
My name is Dan Hartley. I'm one of the programming directors for the Capital City Film Festival.
And you?
Dominic Cochran, co-founder.
And tell me about why you're starting the Capital City Film Festival and what's its special niche.
Me? Okay.
Co-founder.
Sure. Well, we hatched this idea a little over 10 months ago. Actually, the seedlings of the idea were probably well over 2 years old, actually. We just thought there was a need in the market. There's no, as I'm sure you're aware, there's no real outlet for independent film anymore without the Odeon around. So we thought that the market could support a second film festival, and especially one separated exactly by 6 months on the calendar from the East Lansing, and also one that focused on the festival aspect of the film festival. So, meaning we are making music a large part of what we're doing. We're moving the venues around each night, so we're showcasing a different part of the city. We're repurposing some of these old buildings into entertainment venues. Buildings like the Armory on South Washington,
Cool.
the Temple Building in Old Town, things that are not traditionally movie theaters.
Plus, there's parties afterwards.
Yes, absolutely. Well,
Where
that's kind
can
of the
people
music.
find out about all the details? Because we're going to have to run around town to find all these films. So where
Sure.
where do we keep track of the schedule?
Well, we have a website up at capitalcityfilmfest.com. Of course, we're also on Facebook and Twitter.
Are these independent films from local filmmakers or also from filmmakers all across the country?
It's a mix. We have stuff from all over the world. We have a programming block of films from students in Burundi. We have a bunch of Spanish films. We have a documentary from Iran. We have stuff from all over the place, all over the country, as well as some stuff that's more local. Like we have some student films from MSU students and,
Oh, cool.
and more local filmmakers. We have a Michigan filmmaker showcase where it's like five or six films that were done in Michigan, in and around Michigan.
What are your thoughts about what's happening to the film industry in Michigan? Is it going to go down the tubes now that we're not going to get all that funding, or didn't that funding mean much to independent films anyhow?
I think it did. There's a certain niche of independent films that it didn't mean much to. The shoestring budget films, of course, and those are always going to happen. And that's a great thing, of course. But as far as the films where people are actually making a living and feeding families with, they are going to go down the tubes, frankly. And
Yeah,
it's
we're
a
not going
shame.
to see them here.
And it's really too bad. I mean, I'm sure you're aware the film industry in Michigan isn't just 2 years old.
Yeah.
Detroit used to roll more film than LA and New York, mostly because of the auto industry. But there is that foundation of this industry here in Michigan. My company, Optic Productions, has been around for 12 years. You know, before all these film incentives, we'll still be here after. And there's other companies like that too. But it is unfortunate because, you know, I think it would have taken about 5 years to really build a real industry, and it's not over yet. So we'll see.
We'll see.
We're still working.
It's not
on it.
over yet.
We're still working on it.
One of the questions I'd like to ask is, what's the community support been so far for this? I see it a lot of places. What's your reaction to what's going on?
We've had nothing but positive response, and
Yeah.
and you know, we get the question sometimes, you know, why have a second film festival or whatever, and the real reason, the answer to that is, for I think saying that we only can have one film festival in this area is like saying everybody who's interested in independent film, everybody go watch it in one weekend. And that's a ridiculous statement to me. You know what I mean? So I think that there's plenty of interest. Also, like I said, we're making the music a big part of it is huge, I think.
Well, we're also not bogged down by the history of East Lansing Film Festival.
Yeah, it's a new
so we
direction.
can make it into anything that we want.
Is there a theme of sorts, or an organizing principle about how your jury picked the films it has?
Well, Dan can speak to the programming, but overall, our guiding principle was just really focus on the word festival.
Okay.
And that's kind of the guiding principle overall, but Dan can speak to the programming. So.
Yeah, the programming we got most of our films from withoutabox.com, and it's a website that basically puts filmmakers on a list and then tells them about festivals, and so they submit that way. And that's how we got the bulk of our programming. So we got over like 140 submissions, so we watch all of them, decide which ones make the cut, which ones don't, and then kind of from there we figure out how to program it, what thematically fits together, and how we can cobble it together. And then after that, if there's any holes, then we go and seek out films that we want to show.
What dates?
This Thursday through Sunday, so April 14th through 17th.
Okay. And is there always more than one film playing in more than one place, or?
Well, we actually purposely this year, our first year, we know it's the last time we'll probably be able to do it. We did want to make it so, in theory, if you are quickly going between venues, you can see every single thing in the
good.
program.
All right.
So we thought
Okay.
that was kind of cool, yeah.
Do you have any workshops that go along with it? In other words, some other film festivals focus on trying to give advice, filmmakers come in and for young filmmakers, or is yours more fun and part of the festival with music and?
Well, I mean, along with the normal like Q&As after each of our big features, we do have the Michigan Filmmaker Showcase, and that's going to be a screening block as well as a panel. And so, of the 5 films that we're showing, I think 4 out of the 5 are being represented by people who worked on those films. And so that's going to be a panel where people can ask questions and gain insights into independent filmmaking.
Is there one that's got a great buzz that people should know?
Like in the Michigan Showcase?
I guess maybe
Aardvark.
Aardvark.
There we go.
Aha, good.
That's our opening night film.
All right. Directed by whom?
That was directed by Kitao Sakurai.
Yes.
Well, congratulations. Thank you so much for coming. We'll look forward to the film festival on the weekend. You're listening to Lansing Online News. Thank you.
Do you have one in? Did you submit one? Did you firm?
No.
One? Okay.
No, we purposely didn't program anything that we produced.
I was wondering, yeah.
If we would have accepted every film that was submitted from Lansing, we probably would have. But since we did curate the festival, and we didn't want any sense of impropriety.
Yeah, because then people start going,
Yeah.